So for essential question number 1, what were the major foundational beliefs of W.E.B. Du Bois and Marcus Garvey?
One of Du Bois's main beliefs was the belief of the talented tenth, which is a term that describes the likelihood of 1 in 10 black men becoming leaders of their race. And then another belief was Pan-Africanism, which is an ideology and movement that encourages the solidarity of Americans worldwide. Then his main belief was the belief of integrating blacks and whites, having them be equal. In the following quote from his work of The Dawn of Freedom, it says, "The South believe an educated Negro to be a dangerous Negro, and the South is not wholly wrong, for education among all kinds of men always has had and always will have an element of danger and revolution." So what he's basically saying in this quote is he's expressing that blacks were a threat to whites because they did have so much potential, and that whites should not be superior to blacks. Everyone should be equal and integrated among all.
Okay, well, I talk about Marcus Garvey, and one of his really big beliefs was separation. He thought that it was best if the political group would sever ties from the majority, and that it would benefit in like the self-government and self-sustenance. And Garvey wanted to unite all African Americans to establish their own economy, or their own country, and absolute government of their own. And then I have a quote from his autobiography that's, "It is cruel and dangerous to promote social equality as certain black leaders do. The belief that black and white should get together would destroy racial purity of both." And basically he's saying that if, like what Du Bois believed, that they should all unite, he thinks that that would be detrimental because he thinks that it works better if they're just separate.
Okay, and as a follow-up question, how do you think the events that happened earlier in their lives affected their fundamental beliefs?
Okay. Du Bois had these beliefs based on the things that he did in his life and the way that he was treated in his life. For instance, he became the first African American to earn a PhD from Harvard University, and he freely attended school with whites, and he was supported by them. He was basically a black man living in a white world, and he was one of those who had opportunities and advantages that many didn't have. So he based his belief on that perspective as to how his life was, and how he interacted with the white community.
Well, unlike Du Bois, Garvey was not as fortunate, and he didn't have as many opportunities. He was the last born of 11 kids, and his mom was a domestic worker and a farmer, so oftentimes he would attract the lower and middle class African Americans. So he based his belief that he wanted to help them instead of the majority. That's why he thought that they should be separate instead of a whole.
In what major ways did Garvey and Du Bois' beliefs differ?
Well, I have a quote from the Souls of Black Folks from Du Bois, and he said, "The greatest success of the Freedmen's Bureau lay in the planting of free school among Negroes, and the idea that free elementary education among all classes in the South." And basically what he's saying is that he wants to unite everyone together in order to show a stronger presence in the world. And he said that the South believed an educated Negro to be a dangerous Negro, but he didn't want violence or separation. He just wanted to integrate the two groups together.
Well, contrary to Du Bois, Garvey was more of an extremist. He wanted like a totally different separate country for the African Americans. And I have a quote from Document D. "The belief that black and white should get together would destroy the racial purity of both." So he talks about this racial purity, and he's saying that integration would destroy it. So that's definitely a big difference to Du Bois, because Du Bois was all about integration and everything.
In what ways were they the same? What aspects in their lives led to those beliefs?
The only thing that I can say would be the same is that they both wanted better lives for African Americans, because their views on how the racial problem should be handled were totally different.
Yeah, I agreed. I said that they both wanted better lives for African Americans. I just think the way they went about going through that was different, and Du Bois had more opportunities when he was younger, so that affected how he believed in it when he was older as well.
What are the advantages and disadvantages of Garvey's approach and Du Bois' philosophies?
So some advantages of Garvey's was that he wanted, in Document D, he talked about racial purity, which just meant that blacks and whites were kept totally separate, whether it be with culture, reproduction, marriage, anything like that. But some of the disadvantages would be he would need a lot of convincing to be able to convince that many African Americans to start their own country, because in document E, it says Negro people of the Western world were not interested in Africa and could not live in Africa. So, like, not that many people were, like, Garvey's beliefs weren't that popular among the African American people, which is definitely a disadvantage.
So Du Bois, he valued education, and that was relatable to some people, especially like how he grew up and the white support he had behind him. But some disadvantages of that was that he wasn't really relatable to the black population due to his background. And one quote he said was, "In this country, the Negro must remain subordinate and can never expect to be the equal of white men." So he kind of like took what he thought was reality, and that was almost an unpopular opinion to the African Americans, and it weren't like as extreme going.
As a follow-up question, who had more advantages over the other, and did those advantages make one more successful than the other?
I would definitely say that Du Bois had a lot more advantages over Garvey because Garvey wasn't even born in the United States, so Du Bois had that advantage over him from the get-go. But like Du Bois was like raised in like a community where like it was acceptable to have white and black people go to school together. So I would definitely say that he was more accepted among the white community.
Yeah, I agree. Just from like being around them and being educated from like his youth and growing up, like he just always been exposed to the best ideal situation he could be in. So that just made him like everything a little bit easier for him compared to Garvey.
So for essential question number 4, I have, which leader's message has transcended the Harlem Renaissance and made a bigger impact on society today?
In my opinion, Du Bois's message has transcended the Harlem Renaissance and made a bigger impact on society today. For instance, he established the thought of African Americans to be able to attend school and get an education, which that led to them becoming successful, and he became a representation for that you can be black and become successful, with how he earned his PhD from Harvard University. And in this quote from his work of The Dawn of Freedom, it says, "The greatest success of the Freedmen's Bureau lie in the planting of the free school among Negroes and the idea of free elementary education among all classes in the South." What he's trying to say is that African Americans should all have the right to have opportunities just as everyone else and be equal, and equality starts with education. Today in the world, I think that it is mainly integrated among all different types of people that we have living in the United States. There is equality among all types of people who have been given opportunities to do something. That is why I think he has made a bigger impact on society, because we can see that today.
All right. I think Garvey also has some implications that really show through in today's society, because he was really active and he managed to start up multiple organizations and programs, including the UNIA, a newspaper, the shipping line, and he signed the Declaration of Rights. And rather than talking about change, he was somebody that really strived to make the change. And from his story of coming from like a lower class, I think it was more inspiring and relatable to a majority of the African American population at the time. And his movement was more universal and not just focused in America. And from this quote, he said, "The Negro peoples of the world should concentrate upon the object of building up for themselves a great nation in Africa." So it wasn't just America that he was focused on.
For my follow-up question, I have, in your opinion, which of the leader's beliefs do you think you would have stood behind?
I would have definitely supported Du Bois, because I think that the world should definitely be integrated among blacks and whites and all types of people, and everyone in this world should be given the same opportunities and have equality.
I agree, because Garvey was more focused on like separation and kind of complying with society like norms at the time, which is completely opposite than what we have today. So I think Du Bois' ideas were really more beneficial.
Be a representation that you can be black during this time and become successful. With this instance, he earned his
Hi, I'm Olivia.
Hi, I'm Katie.
Hi, I'm Shayla.
Hi, I'm Sarah.